Hi, everyone, and welcome to Practice Growth HQ. Now, today we're going to talk about a new topic, which is that you may be inadvertently turning away patients. That's the opposite of practice growth, isn't it? And it's to do with your digital accessibility. And the perfect person to talk about that is my guest, Stephanie Warlick. Now, Stephanie's got a psychology degree. She's an author. But a key part of what she does is about promoting inclusivity in communications. She speaks widely on accessibility and entrepreneurial thinking and helps businesses and individuals thrive. And that's exactly why we've got her on the show. All the way from Maryland, USA and the greater Washington, D.C. area. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Angus. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to talk to your audience.
Absolutely. Now, look, we like to start with a fast five, Stephanie. Quicker questions, quicker answers, so people can get to know you quickly. Question one, where did you grow up?
Wilmington, Delaware, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay, all right. But does Maryland, does that qualify as Northeast USA? Or do you think?
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
There's a Northeast thread there. Stephanie and I lived at one point, not that far from where Stephanie lives now. Question two, favorite book besides your own?
Cues is my favorite book right now.
Cues?
Cues. It's a fantastic book about nonverbal language, verbal cues, and nonverbal cues, and how to read your audience.
Okay, how interesting. Question three, what's one of your superpowers?
Identifying skills and abilities in individuals to build strong teams.
Oh, good one. We certainly all need that. Question four, something you wish your 20-year-old self knew.
Don't let fear stand in the way of going for your dreams.
Yes, fear. Also, the acronym I've heard, false expectations appearing real. And finally, Stephanie, question five, something that you're grateful for.
My husband.
All right, there we are. I will say family gets a mention pretty often for question number five. Now, Stephanie, you have had a really curious journey, I'd say, up until this point. Your bio includes 30 years in business growth. You've got a consulting group, so you're helping businesses with organizational gaps. You've got a sort of HR thing. But our topic for today is about digital accessibility. What is digital accessibility?
Yeah, digital accessibility is making content on websites and digital media content accessible to individuals with visual impairments, hearing impairments, and potentially other neuro differences.
Okay. So how do we do that?
We do that by creating content that is digitally accessible. I'll give you an example of how that might apply in the workplace. We want to use fonts that are readable, either on our websites or on the documents that we're having, the intake forms that we have our patients fill out. We want to have high color contrast. We want to make sure that it's light colors on dark background and dark colors on a light background. We want to make sure in meetings like you and I are seeing here today, we want to have captions on so that someone who has hearing difficulty can read the words. And actually, captions are excellent for individuals that are different neuroprocessors as well. So those are just some ways that we can apply digital accessibility to be more inclusive.
Okay. Let's talk about the why first, because it's one of the things I know about business people is that most of us have got a to-do list with hundreds of things on it. And it's at some point it's, okay, that's interesting, Stephanie, but I'm pretty busy. I've got a lot of things I'd like to do in the practice. Give me the case for boosting the digital accessibility at my practice.
Besides, it's the right thing to do, which regretfully doesn't seem to motivate a lot of people. It does. Individuals with disabilities and their families have trillions of dollars to spend in the economy worldwide. And if they are unable to come to your quote unquote storefront, your office, you're turning away business. And so that to me is a very compelling reason, but it has been proven. Disability, inclusion, all types of inclusion and diversity have been proven to be good for business and increase morale. It gives goodwill, visibility to your other patients. So there's lots of great business reasons to do it besides, gosh, why not be a nice person?
Yeah, no, I'm playing devil's advocate for a reason sometimes.
Of course.
sometimes these questions pop into our minds and we go, oh, look, I'm going to file this under the nice to do category. And
Yeah,
I guess I think while you're here, let's get you to see if we can get that from the nice to do
sure.
category to the must do category. All right, I feel
Yeah.
more objections coming on. By the way, listeners, if
Well,
if you're speaking to someone about something and they raise objections, this is actually good news because it means they
yeah.
care and they're listening. If they've got no objections at all, it means they probably don't care. So objection number 2, Stephanie. All right, good. In a minute, you're going to tell me how to improve my digital accessibility, but I don't know, with this practice, we're not really set up for people who've got these different disabilities. I'm just making stuff up. We don't have disabled car parks. Maybe our surgery's not very big, and if they're in a wheelchair or whatever else, aren't I just going to create a group of people that I don't know what to do with when they come to practice anyway?
Yeah, that is a great question. Again, we started with it's great to be inclusive. Then we went to we don't want to lose business. But if those aren't compelling enough, then we've got laws out there in the United States. It's the ADA, and the ADA Title II is coming out saying you need to be accessible. In Europe, it's the EAA directive that is going to have high fines starting next year. I am not familiar with the Australian laws, but we've got laws that are out there and propagating throughout the world that are enforcing this so that we have inclusion for all parties. It's universal design. People need to move their thought process from those exceptions to I have to make my practice available to everyone in the world. Of course, I could turn away clients, but there are going to be laws against that. And the fines are exorbitant.
Okay, all right. So even if I'm not necessarily going to be at a practice that's leading the charge on this, at the very least, I know if I don't get my act together, we can be fined. And I wouldn't doubt if you've got that laws in the Europe and in the US that you would expect to see something following similarly in Australia. Do you have any advice? And maybe it's just where people need to go, but I'm just wondering for people who go, okay, all right, look, I'm prepared to do something, but I admit I don't know the first thing about what to do within the practice to get ready
Mhm.
for fixing my digital accessibility. Any advice to people on what they should do?
Yes, and that's exactly why I wrote my book. If you will allow me, I'll just start for a moment and tell you how I even got to writing the book. It's
Sure.
because I was a chief administrative officer hiring individuals that were blind or deaf and or having peers and coworkers, and I had no idea how to communicate with them. We already had a relationship and needing to collaborate. I didn't know how to communicate. And so viewing myself again as a 30-year professional in human resources, I thought if I have this need, other people have this need. And I wrote the book. That's a very simple step-by-step guide that says these are the small things that you can do to increase your inclusivity. So again, applying it back to a practice, it might be make the font size on the intake forms at least 12 point font and a non-serif font so that it's readable for people with low vision.
Non-serif.
Or
What does that mean?
yeah, so a font that has the little lines on the ends.
Like
It's
cursive
called
writing?
no, it's just any letters that have so Arial is a non-serif font.
Okay.
It
Most people have
doesn't
come
have the
across
little
Arial.
lines. Yeah, so basic fonts in 12 point and black. We don't want to do fun, fancy colors, but 12 point or greater. If we are going to be speaking with someone who reads lips because they're hearing impaired, make sure you face them when you speak with them.
Mm.
Don't turn away and communicate because they can't hear you because they're reading lips. Those very simple things are actions that individuals can apply within a practice to immediately enhance accessibility and inclusion. Not digital, some of those are not, but it all adds up to the greater good.
Okay, well, look, since we've, this, in some ways, this interview is going a slightly different direction to what I imagined, but it's no less important than what I had thought. So your book is called
Dark and Silent Office.
Dark and Silent Office. Okay, interesting. Let's stay here for a minute. What are some other things that people should be doing to improve how their office is for people with different backgrounds?
So if the intake forms are on an iPad, we would want to make sure that that it is digitally accessible, that the PDFs that are presented to the individuals have been remediated. There are services out there that do that. I refer people to services all the time to improve their accessibility within their businesses and practices. We talked about font, we talked about color contrast. How about this? What if you have an employee that is hearing impaired or colorblind? Coworkers should be able to communicate with each other to just say, hey, I want to communicate effectively with you. Tell me what's the best way to do that, because every single person's need is different.
Mm.
And so sometimes it's just educating individuals about etiquette and how to communicate with others in the office.
Okay. Look, I dare say there are a bunch of government resources in this space as well. I'm not sure what the relevant department is in Australia. It may be a state government, I think probably one of the health departments, depending on where you live, and I'm sure they would have some resources on their website. I wanted to go back. You said something about getting paperwork remediated. I have no
Yeah.
idea what that means.
I'm glad you asked. Sometimes I use those words just so that you would ask. Remediated is taking the document and going through it and improving the accessibility on it so that it is digitally accessible.
Okay.
By the way, many of the software tools that we use on a daily basis have accessibility checkers in them. So, for instance, the Microsoft suite of products. Down at the bottom, it says check accessibility or has an accessibility code at the bottom. And you can simply at the top hit review and check accessibility, and it will tell you whether the document is accessible or not and what things can be fixed to make it more accessible. The other is alt tags. If you're going to show an image to someone on a screen that they need to read, you wouldn't want to have an alternate tag or an alt tag. And that's a description of what the image is showing, so that if someone is using a screen reader because they are visually impaired, the screen will read, quote unquote, what is in the image to the individual that is listening to the words that are on the screen.
Okay, that's interesting. So alt tags, in my world, my background is mainly marketing in more recent times. And alt tags are very good for Google because
It is.
Google, I must admit, I haven't checked this information for a few months, but certainly in recent times, Google has not been able to see images. And so if you have this alternative name for sometimes a photo will be like JSC 12345. But if you rename the image to, I don't know, dental crown or something, well, okay, so then Google goes, oh, that's a photo of a dental crown. And that helps boost your ranking. But now you're saying for people who, they've got something called a screen reader, which is some software, which will help them take what's on the screen and read to them what's on the screen. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
That is correct. So to further on what you just said, I'm looking at that beautiful picture behind you. If I were to have that in a digital format, I would say white background with a half slice of a lemon and half slice yellow lemon and a green lime. It would describe it, and you're 100% correct. That's another bonus that I give people, that again, if you're not motivated to do alt tags, it's great for SEO.
Yeah, interesting. Now, look, I'm interviewing you on one screen, Stephanie, but I've got another screen open on my desktop, and I'm looking down the bottom of a Word document, and I can see it says accessibility : good to go.
Yeah.
So how about that?
Awesome.
That's Microsoft Word. I never knew that. I'm just wondering, what are the sorts of things now? You've alluded to font, and I'm using something called Aptos. I think that was just the default when I copy pasted something, but that would be very similar to Arial. No, none of the little kind of feet, for want of a better term, on the characters.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. So that's good. I can see that the font size is 12 point. It is black text on a white background, pretty good line spacing. I assume those are some of the things that makes it. And here's a shocking revelation, listeners. Not only are those things good for people who've maybe got accessibility issues, but the rest of the population, they're good too. Like, you get a group of people, I don't know, let's say once they get into their mid-40s or their 50s, like, you drop down those font sizes, I can't read them. Yeah. So there's a big chunk of people where that font size is important. Contrast, I would say, whether people have got some kind of accessibility issue or not, that's a lot of this stuff just makes good sense.
Yes.
Oh,
Tagging images that have colors. So let's say a graph that might need to be viewed. Individuals that have color blindness often have trouble with red and green. That's the most common. So ensuring that a graph has high contrast colors to represent the detail in the graph and are clearly coded with a color code legend is really important. Hate to give your investors a graph about the financials and they can't read it because they're colorblind, right?
yeah. What do you think about his results? And what results? It all looks the same to
Ex-
me. Okay, that's interesting.
exactly.
So we've kind of, towards the end of this interview, we're getting back to the initial question. It's taken a while because I think there is a fair bit of learning for us to do in this. But the premise at the beginning of the interview was that you may be inadvertently turning away patients because of poor digital accessibility. Now, we've been speaking about what you've got to do inside your practice, and indeed, it seems like some of the digital tools we've got are helping us with this anyway. But what are the things that practices do, Stephanie, that would be potentially turning people away even before they come to the practice?
Having a website that is not accessible. Your website is not readable, perhaps by either because it doesn't have the right color contrast or font is difficult. Perhaps it's got a flashing GIF on it that sends somebody with a seizure. Those are common sense things you would think for individuals that are in the medical field, but it happens every day
Yeah.
because the web designer that we hired isn't paying attention to how important that is.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. This is a bit of a bugbear of mine. As I've alluded to, I do have a marketing background. And for some clients who come to us, they want websites with bells and whistles. And generally, what that means is it's what's called above the fold. When you arrive at the web page, the amount of the web page that you can see without having to scroll. Apparently, that term came from newspapers, by the way, which is you'd have a folded newspaper on the doorstep or whatever, and it was what could you see without actually flipping the newspaper up into its full view. And it's similar for websites. And the curious thing is people say, oh, can I get maybe sliding images? So there's multiple images, or maybe one of these background videos where there's the doctor doing something in the background while there's some information in the foreground. And I can tell you, I've read the studies, like not only is this good from an accessibility point of view, but from a conversion point of view, where you've got literally 5 seconds to get people's attention, having these things moving around in the background actually reduces the likelihood of someone staying on your site and doing the thing that you're telling them to do, which is typically to book an appointment. So it's good from an accessibility point of view. It's also good from a business point of view. Don't let someone say, oh, no, you got to have these videos in the background. You got to have these moving images and so on. It's called a sexiness test. The problem with that stuff is it distracts. And it's, what am I here for? What's this about? Who is this for? And you've got 5 seconds. So it's great. It's great digital marketing, and it's also great digital accessibility. Just practically, Stephanie, what does a person who is visually impaired, is there something, do they need to get special software? Is it built into Chrome or Firefox or whatever? How does it work?
So my understanding is, I'll give a name brand, that the most popular screen reader software is called JAWS, and that is an application that is used in their software. But certainly iPhones have capabilities. I don't know, whether it's built into Firefox or things like that. Typically, there's a software, and JAWS is just one of the big brand names that's out there that is very good at reading things.
And how do you spell that?
JAWS.
Oh, just like the movie involving sharks.
Yeah.
Jaws. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you asked me that, and it reminded me, we haven't even touched on, or I didn't touch on, in terms of, let's say, flashing things or scrolling things on the screen. We're talking a lot about people with hearing disabilities or visual disabilities. Someone that has a physical disability that doesn't use a mouse and uses, let's say, a tab button, which is the way people use screen readers get through their screen. They tab through. a screen that has those scrolling pictures and images and so forth isn't really very usable for someone that is tabbing through a website. So we want to be conscientious of that and the format of our website and our documents and as well. The acronym to have to follow good digital accessibility can be remembered by the word POUR, P-O-U-R. We want it to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And if we can address those issues when we make our digital content, then we are getting closer to digital accessibility.
Okay. Is there some sort of app or plugin or something that practices can use, or maybe their marketers can use to give a page a kind of an accessibility score? As I said, I've already alluded to something that's built into Microsoft Word and presumably elsewhere, but what about for websites?
There is, and I don't have the link at my fingertips, but I have a partner that has a free website checker on his website. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'd be happy to share that information back out. Or in fact, it's on my website as a partner and resource, a link to where you can run a checker on your website and get an assessment of accessibility.
Okay, that's a great idea. And look, Stephanie, if you're happy, we would also put that in the show notes for this podcast episode.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
that's great. That's great. Stephanie, this has been a very interesting interview. It hasn't really gone in the direction that I thought it would, but I think if I return to our original discussion at the start of the podcast, like, why should I do this? The truth is, you've won me over. I go, why should I do this? One, because it's the right thing to do. Two, because it's good business. People with various accessibility issues, as you say, they've got money. They want to come and spend it in your business. And then thirdly, it is really curious to me how many examples we've had of where doing things that are good from an accessibility point of view are actually good from a marketing point of view as well. Perhaps, dare I say, stop trying to be so sexy, stop trying to be so almost gimmicky, and let's make it easy for everybody, regardless of their background, to understand what it is that we do.
I agree. I'm so glad I won you over. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm keen to see what your link is, so that we can do these free checks. We've got a number of websites for our clients, and I'm sure the listeners will want to do the same thing, which is, okay, check the site and figure out what it is that we can do better. I'm really pleased about the Word document. Listeners, as I already alluded to, on the bottom of my screen, it says accessibility, good to go. And I'm like, yes. It's good to know that I haven't missed that. Stephanie, as we start to wrap up, further thoughts for the listeners on things they can be doing?
I recommend everyone start to use an accessibility checker. It's not a further thought, but just to recap. So yours is good to go, but again, they can go to review and check accessibility, and it will tell them in any of their Microsoft products, whether it is. Many clients are going to use Canva for their marketing materials. Canva has a built-in accessibility checker. There's lots of tools that we're using on an everyday, but I find that awareness is the number one step for our staff, for our population, our community, bringing this awareness of these small things that people can do. I've been using the phrase, let's turn random acts of kindness into intentional acts of inclusion, because it's good for business. It's good for business. And I think if we take those small steps, bringing awareness and taking these digital content steps on a daily basis, we will start to see some really positive growth in our business and communities.
Fantastic. Look, Stephanie, I really appreciate your time with me today. If people want to learn more or get in touch, what should they do?
The best place to find me is stephaniewarlick.com, and that has all of my resources and will lead people to the Dark and Silent website.
All right, fantastic. So that's Stephanie, STEPHANIE, Warlick, WARLICK.com. Are you the only Stephanie Warlick on the planet?
Nope, I'm the only one who got stephaniewarlick.com.
Okay. I used to work in the immigration department, don't shoot me, listeners, and I actually did a check on back in the Wild West. You could do this stuff these days. It's so tightly controlled, you could never do an unauthorized search. And I found one other Angus Pryor. who's in the UK. But as far as I know, there's the two of us and there's nobody else. Who knows? Maybe a baby's been born in the last whatever. All right. Once again, thank you so much for your time, Stephanie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was lots of fun.
All right, everyone, we've covered a bit there, haven't we? And I'm sure there are things for you to be thinking about. What is it that you can do to be improving this in your business? But as I like to say every week, it's not knowledge that's power, it's applied knowledge that's power, which begs the question, what's one step you can take as a result of what you heard from this interview today? Finally, if you got some value from our time together today, then please head to where you're listening to this podcast and leave us a lovely review to give us the encouragement to bring you more great content every week on Practice Growth HQ.